Hi, welcome to the Paranormal Peep Show on the Paranormal UK Radio Network with myself, Neil Ward, and fellow host. He's returned once more from the darkness. It's Andrew Chaplin.
Well, I'm definitely not from the light. Hello, Neil. How are you doing?
Yeah. Well, I say the darkness because you're coming out the winter months now. So you've been like frequenting dark alleyways and doing readings on people. That's what I kind of guessed from that.
Oh, I see what you mean. I thought you meant kind of like from Halloween era. I can't remember the last time I was here. Was it Christmas, Halloween, whenever it was?
Yeah. Last couple of shows. Ben did January and he also did February. So I think you must have been with us for December. That's right. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Oh, Christmas then. Yeah, the Christmas darkness is gradually subsiding now.
Yeah, and I'm getting a little bit happier as the spring starts to become things, and we're starting to get a bit Eastery. So that's nice.
Yeah.
So how have you been doing?
Well, my favourite times of year are spring and autumn anyway. I find like the depths of winter too cold and the depths of summer too hot. So it's coming up to my favourite time of year when it's just about right.
Yeah.
How have I been doing? Arranging events and that's about it really. My life is basically arranging psychic nights here, there and everywhere. If people haven't joined it already, join Tuned In Events, Tuned with a D, Tuned In Events on Facebook, Instagram and blah, blah, blah. And yeah, we're kind of like here, there and everywhere. We're going to do a new concept. We're going to do psychic suppers now. So this is where people sit down and they have some food, have a nice little buffet meal, and then have readings at the same time. So sort of kicking that off as well.
I'm familiar with that because I've done that at a few spiritualist churches over the years where I've been roped in as a psychic reader, medium, and they tend to do fish and chip. I'm the only person there that has a vegetarian option. They kind of tend to forget about that and they go, oh, and it throws a spanner in their works a bit. But never mind, it gets sorted. I've also been doing a little bit of watching of Dr. John Campbell on YouTube, and he came up with a very interesting thing the other day to do with the national statistics of deaths.
Yeah.
And as we both know, there's been an excess in the UK since they introduced a certain medical procedure a few years ago that was turned medical and experimental. And suddenly the deaths throughout the world have started to skyrocket. No one can explain them, or people are refusing to explain them. So the UK is following suit, it seems, of Canada, where they're now readjusting the way they count their death figures.
Of course they will.
So apparently, all the people that have died are apparently going to resurrect themselves now because they mysteriously appear to be alive, according to these figures.
Yeah.
Problem sorted. Basically, to solve the problem, you move the goalpost and you say, "Don't look there. Look at this new calculation instead." So
I mean, Japan did the same thing with Fukushima. Did you hear about this one? So they have a safe. They had a safe limit of how much the human body can take in terms of radioactivity, but they needed personnel to go in and sort out the Fukushima situation. And so all they did was raise the limit. Just raise the limit of, I'm not even joking, raise the limit of what is the safe limit a human body can take for radiation, and that allow personnel to come in. It's great. All you do with the science is you just make it up. You just make up the science. Did you hear of that guy in New Zealand as well, who's actually working for the government, who's working as a data analyst, and he seems to reckon, this is his allegation, he seems to reckon that within 2 weeks, 21% of people who got the jibbity jib jib died within 2 weeks.
Wow.
21% of people.
Is that New Zealand or just worldwide? Or
this particular data analyst was New Zealand. He was working for the New Zealand government. I can try and find his name a bit later on. But he came out in public, and I think he was on InfoWars, and he was a whistleblower basically, and he basically said, "Look, this is what's going on. This is my job. I was being paid by the government to sort out the data and statistics. This is what I found. It's absolutely shocking, and the whole world should know about it." And guess what BBC News says? Conspiracy theory. Yeah, brilliant.
Of course.
Fantastic, love it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they'd love to look at the data themselves, but of course they won't.
Of course they won't.
It means they'd have to report it. Yeah. Anyway, talking of science, we're very pleased tonight. We've got a scientist with us tonight.
An actual scientist, not a pretend scientist, the real scientist.
Actual scientist, yeah. Mr. David Ash joins us, and welcome, David. Are you there?
I'm indeed here. Lovely to be with you both. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Hello, David. I'm hoping you didn't get jibbity jabs.
No, I didn't do the jibbity jab. I wouldn't go near it.
Thank you. We need more scientists to actually speak out the truth. Yeah, definitely more of that.
Why did you, out of interest, why did you decide not to be persuaded?
Well, because it's an unproven science. I mean, those guys were coming out with that jibbity jab without proper tests, and it was obvious to me that the whole COVID issue was a money-making scam for the pharmaceutical industry. What it is that they've invested huge sums of money in this messenger RNA technology, but the patents run out within 20 years. So they needed a pandemic to test it, to get their money back within the 20-year time frame. And because the pandemic wasn't coming along very quickly, they needed to sort of, there were a number of COVIDs, wasn't there? There was swine flu and these other, but they didn't kind of
avian flus and things.
Yeah. So they needed to sort of bioengineer the virus a bit to make sure it worked this time, so that they could have a damn good pandemic and make a shitload of money. And but I mean, look at as you were saying, Andrew, the consequences are terrible, shocking in terms of killing people.
Yeah. I think I found it. I think his name might be Barry Young, interviewed by Liz Gunn. I think that's yeah, I've recognised this video clip. So yeah, the New Zealand Health Ministry basically denies it, but Barry Young is the guy to have a look at, and he's interviewed by Liz Gunn. Make up your own minds on that, folks. And David, just to kind of like back up what you're saying in terms of like a made-up science, I remember the people pushing the jibbity jabs basically saying, if you're going to have like a main jab and then subsequent boosters, you can mix them up a little bit. Now, the thing is, each of these jabs have got a different technology. So some of them are RMNA and some of them are not. And then some of them work like a normal flu vaccine and the others don't. So there's different technologies. But the experts, so-called experts, are saying you can mix them up. So you can have a Pfizer over here, you can have a Johnson & Johnson over here, you can have an AstraZeneca over here. Mix it. That's not science. Science is not just, for a hodgepodge load of ingredients and just like hope for the best. It's ridiculous. Would you agree with that, David?
I definitely would. I mean, that's news to me that you could. They're saying that you could mix them, because I think that's shocking news.
Yeah.
Well, I guess you can mix. It's just the results you get. That's like what's going to happen. Mix them. No one's stopping you mixing them, but it's whether you can actually come back and tell people you've mixed them afterwards.
I mean, it's like a chef, Neil. A chef going to the kitchen. Technically, he could just pull random ingredients out. He could have, I don't know, a bit of lettuce, a bit of cucumber, a bit of tuna, maybe some chocolate, maybe a bit of raspberry sauce, and maybe some custard, and fry it all together and serve that as a meal. Whether it'll be a nice meal or not, I don't know.
Well, that's it, yeah. I mean, I'm sure the rats would eat it, and the mice, because they don't care. But unfortunately, when you're testing these things out on rats and mice, they don't even know that they're being tested. That's the problem. But unfortunately, the great British public and world public don't being tested either.
Yeah, this is fantastic. So as we're talking, I'm kind of Googling things. So I put in the mix of the mix of the jibbity jabs. We'll just call it jibbity jabs. It says mixing jibbity jabs, and this is from the NIH, their official website. Mixing jibbity jabs may enhance the immune response, and it increases flexibility for when people need a booster dose. But doses of the jibbity jab they first receive are not available. So basically saying it enhances the immune response if you mix the jibbity jabs. Awesome. So I'll tell you what, next medical condition that I have, Neil, I'm just going to go into a pharmacist. I'm just going to go randomly. I'll have that one, that one, that one, that one, that one, that one. I'm going to mix them all together. Whatever pills they could peel from the, take from the shelves, just crush them all up, stick them in a pot, take them, happy days. That's how science works, isn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, David, if we move on from the controversial, and I dare say your book's perhaps controversial in a way, you've brought out this wonderful book, which is called Superenergy and the Quantum Vortex. And I know you've been doing presentations, you've done a few YouTube videos, interviews as well. So, and I'm getting through it, but I must admit, as I explained before we started, that I'm not one for physics and things like that. It must be a challenge for you to try and take physics that is in the realms of people like Niels Bohr and Einstein and all these people, and try and bring it into layman's terms for people to understand. Is that always a challenge?
Well, the thing is, I'm a physics teacher, not a professional physicist, and my job is to make complex, physics understandable to children and to the lay public. So it's right up my street to get rid of the maths, and I explain things with analogies, cat and mouse analogies, hedgehog and flea analogies, tadpole analogies, full of analogies. And it's a bit like the parables of Jesus. He taught people with little stories, and I'm doing the same with the physics. So yeah, it's a challenge, but I've got this set of 10 essays I've written on the quantum vortex, which I'm publishing as a book, Was Einstein Right? And it's a handbook of the universe. And so you can get a complete understanding of the universe from the smallest quantum to the largest galaxy in just a very, very small little book. So it's kind of making science really simple and understandable. And I'm a whistleblower myself because I'm blowing the whistle on quantum mechanics. So before I start, I crash quantum mechanics, quark theory, the general theory of relativity, and basically replace most of the theories in physics with an incredibly simple idea, which I got out of yogic philosophy. So it's interesting you guys are channels because, you see, I am not capable of doing what I'm doing. What's happened is that I've received the information. The word genius comes from jinn, which means spirit in the
Islamic world, I think, isn't it?
It's the Islamic world. It's Persian. Sorry about that. I just had a little mental block.
That's fine.
The word jinn in Persian stands for spirit. So genius actually means someone who's inspired by spirit. So I know that I'm getting my information from the spirit world. And I've been told that one of my guides is Albert Einstein. I've had this tremendous affinity with Albert Einstein. And I was just doing I get these ideas that just pop into my head. And I was putting this quote, which is right at the end of the new book, a really beautiful quote about God that Einstein wrote, you see. And when I looked up the reference, apparently it was a banker who was sending out letters to Nobel Prize laureates wanting to know their opinion on God. And so it said that Einstein just scribbled this quote on the letter. And as I was just about to put that thing in, this prompt came into my head. He scribbled it on the back of the letter. And I thought, there's only one person who knows whether he wrote on the front of the letter or the back of the letter. So that kind of confirmed for me that basically I'm just an extension of the computer. The real person who's doing the work is Albert Einstein, working from spirit world. I'm convinced of that. I can't say that anywhere else, but I can say it here on the Psychic Show, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. Have you got the quote to hand? Because I'm sure people would like to hear it.
Well, I have got it to hand, actually. If I can pull it up, it means I have to just go into my computer. Is that okay? Can I?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, sure. I know that there was a quote by Albert Einstein that said, "God does not play ice, which is
Yeah. So what this is, it's really beautiful. I'm just bringing it up now. Number
because
10.
the whole concept of people getting ideas for kind of genius concepts, whether it's song titles or whether it's artistic or whether it's scientific, a lot of things have been inspired out of the ether, haven't they, Neil? You probably heard of this, like people just get an idea, just or sometimes, Neil, they wake up from a dream. I've heard this before. They wake up from a dream with like this amazing concept, and then they put it down on paper if they've got pen and paper to hand, and then it turns.
I think that's happened to some physicists actually that had dreams, or I can't remember, some physicists that had dreams of certain things, and like of atoms or something like that. I can't remember who it was now. And that's how they got the idea of certain physics anyway.
I didn't know genius derived from genie. That's fascinating.
Yeah, from jinn, from spirit, Now, I'll read this out. This is right at the end of the book. It's the final paragraph of my book. The Colorado banker wrote to a number of Nobel laureates for their opinions on God. On the back of the letter he received, Einstein scribbled his reply. I cannot conceive of a personal God who would directly influence the actions of individuals, or would sit in judgment of creatures of his own creation. My religiosity consists of a humble admiration of the infinitely superior spirit that reveals itself in the little that we can comprehend about the knowable world. That deeply emotional conviction of the presence of a superior reasoning power which is revealed in the incomprehensible universe forms my idea of God.
That he kind of doesn't answer it. But I suppose it comes down to how do you define what God is? Because it sounds like it's not really going into the Judeo-Christian version of God, but to some extent he has got some belief in something. Would you say?
Well, no, he'd make it very clear that he believes in God as a superior spirit that is behind the whole universe. Not, it's something much bigger than the Judeo-Christian sort of concept of God.
Yeah, interesting.
But I go a lot deeper into this whole thing in my physics. You'll see I make it very clear what that God is, and also that God is very personal to us, because actually it turns out that E equals mc squared says that everything is energy, but energy has no mass. Energy is no thing. Energy is actually more like a thought than a thing. And so the whole base of reality, because the universe is more like a great thought than a great thing, and you can't have a great thought without a thinker. So the bedrock of reality is consciousness. But the thing what we discover in the physics is that if particles are all acts of consciousness, these vortex particles I'm talking about, then they all come from the same consciousness, because they all have exactly the same physical characteristics. It's almost as though they've come out of the same hand. And therefore the consciousness that underlies the universe, underlies energy, is one. It's indivisible. So there's something inside you, Neil, and you, Andrew, that's looking at me, looking through your eyes, that's hearing through your ears. Well, that conscious awareness that's also aware of your thoughts. It's the same conscious awareness that's inside me that's looking out of my eyes and hearing through my ears. In other words, we are the one being in the many bodies. And that is why we're called human beings, because Hu is the ancient Egyptian word, one of the ancient Egyptian words for the divine or for God or for consciousness. So we are the human beings. We are the expression of that consciousness in the whole of humanity. And why is that consciousness here? Because the consciousness is growing, is learning, is growing in wisdom through its creation. And there's no better opportunity to learn, if you're God, than to be a human being on planet Earth.
I would go with that. And I don't know if you've heard of Neil Donald Walsh.
I have. I love him. I love his.
Yeah, this is very much his kind of line of channeling with God, in quotation marks, with conversations with God.
Also, the Seth books by Jane Roberts also has a parallel to that. That's the kind of book that I go for that.
What's exciting is that I can actually give a foundation to what Neil Donald Walsh is saying, and these other people are saying, what you're experiencing as mediums through physics, through a new approach to physics. So we're going to sweep away the whole of the materialistic physics, knock it for six, and replace it with this vortex physics. You see, when I was 16, I read a book on yogic philosophy, and the yogis in ancient India had used their siddhi powers to shrink their consciousness commensurate with the small. And they actually took themselves into the smallest realms of the atom, and what they saw was spin. So they came out with this idea of the vortex, and that vortex idea was applied by 19th century physicists like Lord Kelvin and all the great luminaries of the 19th century into a vortex atom theory, which was an all-British theory. But what happened is this, as new discoveries about the atom came in, the vortex theory couldn't explain them, and it was ditched. And then the problems that the vortex theory couldn't be explained was explained by a bunch of Europeans based in Copenhagen. Heisenberg was one of them. Niels Bohr was one of them. He was the leader of this group of people. Schrödinger, and Paul Dirac. Anyway, they got together at the Copenhagen Institute of Theoretical Physics, and they cobbled together a completely new theoretical physics called quantum mechanics. And Einstein despised it. He said it's a real witch's calculus, so ingenious in its complexity as to be impossible to prove wrong. But what happened is that 10 years later, in Britain, a new particle was discovered called a neutron. And this neutron, which is the detonator of the hydrogen bomb, detonator of the atomic bomb, okay? This neutron disproves the uncertainty principle of Werner Heisenberg. And what they've done is they've covered it up. They've ignored the evidence, which is like a mortal sin in science. Yeah. So I'm the whistleblower. I'm coming out with the evidence. I'm putting Einstein right and saying Einstein was right and Heisenberg was wrong. And basically what it is what they should have done is they should have, when they discovered subatomic particles, they should have applied the vortex idea to subatomic particles because it really works. So in my new book, Was Einstein Right? Which is a collection of essays I've written, 10 essays, which is up on Substack. So anyone who wants to read the essays before they're published, it doesn't cost you anything. You just go to Substack, and it's David Ash 333 on Substack. Just look me up, go in there, and you subscribe, and you can get for free, and you can read these essays. And what I do in these essays, I just go through the whole of the physics and rebuild the whole of the physics around this idea that the smallest particles of matter are whirlpools of light. Now, I'm not going to go into the physics tonight because we're dealing with a psychic peep show. What I want to do is not to focus on the quantum vortex tonight, but focus on the superenergy. Because with the book, it is superenergy and the quantum vortex. And the front of this book is all about the superenergy. Now, apparently, I've got to do a book signing at W.H. Smith sometime, so I think it's going to be stopped by W.H. Smith. Certainly, if you go to Waterstones, you can order it. There are a few supply problems, but you can certainly get it on Amazon. And the thing is that what I'm showing is that how is it that this world we're living in that seems so real and solid and concrete, how can it be formed out of thought forms? Well, energy is more like a thought than a thing. And it's like a string theory. What happens is that the energy is represented by this line. When the energy moves like so, it's light. And the yogis said that light is just a denser level of mind, a denser level of thought. See, so they knew that the nature of our reality is thought. The Aboriginals got it right when they said that we're living in a dream state. This is a dream reality that we're in. But so this is, if you like, my work is a string theory, if you want to know the genre in physics. But in physics, they talk about vibration. They cannot get their heads away from vibration. This is the great mistake in physics. They try to explain the whole universe in terms of the waveform. The reason is that physics is dominated by men. And it says in the Talmud, we see the world not the way it is, but the way we are. And so men project the masculine principle on the universe, which is the waveform. It's like the sperm, you see? And the Native Americans said that light is masculine. Lucifer, you see, the light bearer. And they've completely sidelined, completely ignored Meta, mother, the feminine form of energy. And this is it. It's like the ovum. It's spherical. It's receptive. And the word matter comes from mater, meaning mother in the Latin. So what I'm doing is I'm bringing in the female form of physics, the feminine form of energy, which is this whirlpool. You see, the idea is that the energy spins. So I'm bringing in a spinning string theory instead of a vibrating string theory. I'm saying there are two forms of energy. One is the wave and one is the vortex, you see? And the reason you get this wave-particle duality, which is why they all think they're waves, is because the wave drives into the vortex and pushes it forward in wave motion, like a tadpole. So the thing is that the universe is set up by this spin form of energy, and the spin, it sets up inertia, it sets up resistance. You know, when you spin a pebble on a pond, it skips across the pond because the spin keeps the pebble in the plane. You stabilize a ship with a gyroscope, yeah? Well, the spin in every direction resists movement in any direction. So inertia, static inertia, is set up by the vortex. Richard Feynman said the laws of inertia have no known origin. And I've just explained it in 2 minutes. So I can explain things in physics which I can't explain. See?
So I'm right in thinking that for something like, let's just take light, for instance, and you've got photons. Yeah. So the photon is the, if you like, the physical bit, but what's unknown is what's actually causing that physical bit to move, and that would be the thought bit.
That's the thought bit. You've got it. The photon is a waveform of energy, and nobody knows why a wave. And it's like with me, why the vortex? Well, it's like the universe is only 13.5 billion years old. The electron has been around for 10 to the 22 years, which is trillions upon trillions of years. 10 to the 33 years, the proton is their estimated lifespan. So basically, if you imagine there's a God in eternity, what was God doing before the universe? It's just thinking up whirlpools and waves, just imagining whirlpools and waves. And then eventually, so stuffed full, this great mind was so stuffed full just of whirly gigs and wavy gigs. The whole lot exploded out. And that's the Big Bang into the universe. And everything's just been reacting and interacting. And the consciousness has been behind it all, just observing all the ways all these waves and vortices have been working together. And you know, this is the whole process of evolution behind the scenes. But there's this conscious awareness behind it, learning, growing. And we're all part of that learning progress. We're just a phase in this whole explosion since the Big Bang of, you know, we've come up from microbes, from bacteria, from plants through animals, and now we're these human beings. And there's so much that's gone into the formation of us human beings. But, I mean, the divine, it's having such an adventure being human beings. I mean, there are things that spirit can do in a human body that just blows, just beyond anything that could ever be imagined. So it's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to be alive, especially at this time.
So the question is there another stage beyond human?
Absolutely there is.
Which would
be? So let's explain it to you here now, because I get distracted. My enthusiasm. The speed of the energy, the thing about these waves and vortices is there's nothing there. So they're bits of speed with a shape. So the shape is either a wave or a vortex. So we're now going to talk about the speed. The speed of the energy that makes up our world is the speed of light. Now, in physics, they've shown that you can't move a particle faster than the speed of light. All right? Well, of course you can't. If the particle is formed out of a bit of movement at the speed of light, you can't move it faster than the speed that makes it. But that doesn't mean you can't have other levels, other worlds, other levels of reality, other dimensions in which you have vortices and waves, the same laws of physics, but the underlying speed of motion is faster than the speed of light. Now, if you read the Urantia book, the next level out is twice the speed of light. The next level out beyond that is 16 times the speed of light. So you see, using this physics, simply by that little bit of logic, you'd realize there could be other worlds, and they're based on speeds faster than the speed of light. As soon as we've got that, watch, we get this. All right? Thanks to IKEA, this little... I used to use the nested Russian dolls, but now I'm using this. This is the physical world. All speeds between 0, which you see is the little bit in the middle, and the speed of light belong in the physical three-dimensional world, okay? All speeds between 0 and twice the speed of light belong in the hyperphysical level of the universe, okay? And which is the fourth dimension, and all speeds between 0 and 16 times the speed of light belong in the fifth dimension and beyond, okay, which I call the superphysical. So this is superphysical, hyperphysical, and physical, okay? Now, if you notice from this system, this is the harmony of the spheres, folks. If you notice in this system, the lesser is part of the greater. 30 miles an hour is part of 60 miles an hour. You can, a jet can go at walking speed, at the speed of your bicycle, the speed of your car. But when you're on your bicycle, you can't catch a jet, okay? So that's the law that, if we're in the lesser part, we're contained in the lesser part, but the greater part is containing the lesser part. So what this means is there could be beings all around us because our space-time continuum is part of their reality, is part of their world, okay? They could be all around us, but we wouldn't be aware of them because the speed of their energy is moving too fast. So the separation between us and these hyperphysical and superphysical beings would be speed. Now, isn't it interesting? In ancient times, they said, there are angels all around us, but we are not aware of them. We can't see them because they're moving too fast. And also they said there are fairies all around us, and we're not aware of them because we're too slow and clumsy. So my battle cry is there's more reason to believe in angels and fairies than in quarks and the virtual particles of quantum reality.
It's refreshing to have the physicists talk about angels and fairies.
Oh, it's going to be so much fun because I'm going to smash up the whole of their physics. I'm going to come in with this completely new physics that explains everything with a simple little model. And then I start going on about angels and fairies. And what I'm saying is the next PhD you've got to do is on angels' wings and fairy rings. Do you think I can see at Imperial College they're going to love me? I mean, we're going to have so much fun.
So if you had Professor Richard Dawkins here.
Oh, Professor Ancient Dawkins. Yes, let's get him into a debate. Yes, that's going to be so much.
All this nonsense, all this silly nonsense. If he is to say to you, what is this made up? It's just somebody's imagination. What would your response be to him?
Oh, God, we're going to have fun. But anyway, yes, so the thing is that I noticed you've got some ETs behind you, Andrew, there.
Yeah.
So what it is that it rather than move through space-time, you move in and out of space-time. What I'm predicting in my physics is that every single subatomic particle in your body is formed out of a little whirligig like this, which is moving at the speed of light. Now, there is a technology. It's called a superenergy resonance technology. It's based on resonance. But if I were to put a body made of these little vortices in which the speed is the speed of light into a beam of superphysical or hyperphysical energy, then the little vortices, the speed within the vortices would resonate with the speed of energy in the beam, and they would all accelerate to the speed of the energy in the beam to get equilibrium, you see? So the body would vanish out of physical space-time and pop up in the hyperphysical or superphysical world. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Beam Me Up Scotty. You saw Scotty going into the chamber and into the beam. Well, this is basically foreseeing what's to come, because I'm actually predicting this technology. I use it to explain Sai Baba phenomena, and, use it to explain how people can appear and disappear. So, and what the extraterrestrials are doing is that they are far in advance of us. They know all about that. They don't bother waste their time with quantum mechanics and uncertainty and stuff like that. They're already working with the vortex technology, the spiritual technology. And so what they do is that they use these resonance beams to move their craft in and out of space-time. And this is why with UFOs, they appear and disappear. Suddenly they're there and then suddenly they're gone. So rather than moving through space-time, they're moving in and out of space-time. And once we master this technology, we'll have freedom of the universe.
Mm.
So this would answer the age-old question that lots of people, skeptics particularly, whereas people like myself and Andy just accept that, well, they can get from there to here, but with some superb technology. Whereas the skeptics saying, there are no such things as a UFO because it's impossible to go beyond the speed of light, so therefore there can't be UFOs. Whereas we obviously know there's so much data out there for UFOs. So basically you've kind of honed in on an aspect that I've long been interested in, which is about how these UFOs get from there to here. Now,
that's right. Sorry?
I was going to say, we also got an interest in life after death. Andy and I kind of think that the spirit world, for want of a better word, utilizes or has awareness of this procedure, this natural phenomena, if you like, this natural ability to move between worlds, because they obviously do it. They can appear in our world from higher realms or whatever you want to call it. And the aliens or ETs have got that as well. Would you agree with that? That both separate beings actually using the same kind of thing?
Yes. What I'll do is answer the first thing: how we deal with the skeptics. You notice what I'm doing is I'm now reorganizing myself. I'm going to launch the first book, Is Einstein Right? And the first thing I do is knock the ground from under the skeptics' feet by rubbishing everything they believe in. If I can knock out quantum mechanics, quark theory, every single theory in physics, and point out that it's a complete waste of time and money, these particle accelerators, and really just show that these PhDs haven't got a clue about anything, then when they come up and they say to me, we don't believe in that, I say to them, well, look, before you challenge my theory, you explain to me, how the neutron fits into the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. So by coming in with the theoretical physics, it gives us a very strong hand. Now, the next thing is near-death experiences. You mentioned life after death. My book on superenergy begins with the research of that's going on into near-death experiences. And there's an amazing chap called Sampania in New York who's managed to get a paper into the New York, the Annals of the New York Academy of Science. And this paper came out. It was signed by 18 academics from all over the world, 4 days before Putin invaded Ukraine on the 18th of February in 2022. And basically what they said is they've got incontrovertible evidence for the reality of near-death experiences. And the fact that that paper's been published in a scientific journal, a reputable scientific journal, means that near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences have come into the body of science. We can treat them scientifically, you see. So what I do is I explain that what we're doing is we're growing two bodies simultaneously. We're growing a body in physical energy, which is the body we're looking at, but this is just a vehicle. And at the same time, we're growing a body in hyperphysical or soul energy. The hyperphysical is the soul level. We go back to here. The physical, which is the third dimension, is the body level. And then the next level out, the hyperphysical, is the level of the soul. And the third level out is the level of the spirit. Okay, so physical, hyperphysical, superphysical, body, soul, and spirit. Okay.
How would you differentiate between soul and spirit?
Basically on the intrinsic speed of the energy. And also there are other facts. There's another type of matter called plasma, which is non-atomic matter. And spirit is much more in the nature of fields. The thing is that 98%, 99% of the universe is formed of plasma, mainly in stars. The atomic matter that we're in is extremely rare. So the thing is that spirits are formed out of a completely different type of matter. It's matter that's organized into fields rather than organized into atoms. So the particles are there, the electrons and the protons, but they're not in forms that we're familiar with. But what's happened is that these fields, this is the life field, is organizing the two bodies simultaneously. The hyperphysical, which is this soul level, is atomic matter. The superphysical, so that's the soul level, is atomic matter. The physical level is atomic matter. But the superphysical level is non-atomic matter or plasma, okay? Now, the thing is that the field, the life field, the plasma field, overshadows the little zygote at the beginning, at the time of conception, you know, when the sperm goes into the ovum. And at the same time, whatever's happening in the third dimensional world is happening in the fourth dimension. So we're forming a soul body in parallel to the physical body, the third dimensional body. And they're growing simultaneously. And there's resonance between the soul body and the physical body through the DNA molecule. The DNA molecule is a coil. It's just like a coil in a radio set or a television set. So I've got this whole section in my work, in the book on superenergy, called DNA resonance, which explains the way that the soul body resonates through the physical body. So the thing is that the mind, the cognitive faculties are held in the soul body, in the hyperphysical body, not in the physical body. It's like the physical body is just the vehicle for the soul to come into, for the soul body to come into. Mm-hmm. And then so what happens at death of the physical body? It's no different to simply shedding a snake shedding its skin. It's simply we step out of the car is scrapped, and the soul body goes on. And the soul body is identical to the physical body, which is why people, when they pass over, they're greeted by their grandmother. She's recognizable because she's got a body that's identical to the body she had when she was physically here. I mean, I call it the two-body dilemma. When people have an outer-body experience, they're in a body looking down at their body, and they're confused. So we need this physics so people are prepared for the passage on. People need to know that they're eternal beings, that death is just like shedding the skin. It's just like taking off an overcoat. It's just like stepping out of a motor car, you know. And there's so much learning that needs to be done. There's such a desperate need for this physics. We've just got to get out there and clear the crap of contemporary science. I mean, there's so much hogwash there. So much stupidity.
You describe the belief in materialism in your book quite a lot. Science is anchored in materialism.
That's right, which is completely, Einstein disproved materialism. Einstein's difficult to understand, not because of his maths or his theories, but because of his worldview. He said that matter and light are real, but there's no substance to them. And so the thing is that materialism is the idea. With materialism, it's such a simple idea, and that is that the idea of materialism is the particle of material substance call it an atom or a quark, exists and moves. And Einstein said no. Einstein said E equals mc squared. M is the material. It stands for mass and material. And the thing that comes first is E, the energy. And the energy is linked to mass and material by c, which is the speed of light. In other words, mass is not a material substance. It's a vortex. It's spinning light. You get the light and you make it spin, and that's how you get the mass. This shows you visually E equals mc squared. E equals mc squared says there's vast amounts of energy and minute amounts of matter in the hydrogen bomb. I mean, there are vast amounts of wool in one tiny little ball. You see, it's a very compact form of wool, very compact form of energy. So all these mysteries are revealed. I mean, look, in my book, in my essays, in this book here, I can explain nuclear energy in one paragraph. Richard Feynman, one of the greatest physicists of the 20th century, said this. He said, nuclear energy. We have the formulas for that, but not the fundamental understanding. We know it's not gravitational. We know it's not chemical. We know it's not electrical, but we don't know what it is. And I've explained it with the vortex theory in one paragraph.
Isn't there a thing of traditionally the dangerous type of nuclear energy is fission, but they've just about cracked fusion? Am I right in that? That's
correct. It's much safer, yeah. Mm. And you don't use it. Well, you do use it in the bomb. You use it in the hydrogen bomb, but it's almost like Einstein said his greatest mistake was to send that letter to Roosevelt, which kicked off the Manhattan Project, which kicked off the development of nuclear weapons. Mm. Because they thought that the Nazis may develop the bomb, but as it turned out, the Nazis had kicked out all the Jewish physicists, so they didn't have the brain power to make a bomb. Yeah. But anyway, I don't think it was a mistake. I think we human beings have had to have the opportunity to exterminate ourselves. Mm. We have a choice, free choice. We've got to be given that choice. Are we going to destroy ourselves completely? Or are we going to learn about love? Are we going to learn about forgiveness? Are we going to, sort ourselves out? And so I think it's very exciting that we're living on the knife edge. Will they or will they not push the button anymore? I mean, I tell you what, it makes it a thriller. Because you see, if this is a dream, and if we are the supreme consciousness in our physical bodies, that little chant, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, it simply says that we are in the universe, but the universe is in us. Mm. Everything is in us. The source consciousness is in us. So we are the actors, we're the theatre production, we're the audience, we're the director, the producer of this amazing show called Human Life, okay? And the ticket to the theatre is a body. You've got to take on a body, and you enter this 3D virtual reality. It's like, if you think of the way it's going this way, isn't it, with AI and what have you? So we step into these little bodies, and we come into this show, and now we're coming right to the end of the show, and it's really getting a thriller. Are we going to blow ourselves to kingdom come, or are we not? I mean, oh my God!
I'm afraid that people they talk about people like Biden's got his finger on the button, but I'm more afraid that he might nod off on the button.
I love it.
Yeah, there's a thing with ghosts that I've always been fascinated with many people that have seen spirits and things like that. They always describe them standing in doorways or windows or frames of some sort. And I met a lady many, many, many years ago in the early 90s, and she described, and she wasn't a spiritualist or anything like that, and she had no experience of ghosts or spirits, except on this particular occasion that she happened to tell me. She says, I told my doctor, and he laughed at me, basically, she said. But she said that she was helping her husband, who was very, very ill, and she was straightening his pillows one day, and he was so ill he had to breathe through an oxygen mask. And one day she was straightening his pillow for him as he lay ill in bed, and he just said, I want to die. And he said with that, he literally just died in her arms. But she laid him back down. She said she saw this vaporous mist come out of his chest, and it rose up towards the ceiling and went across the ceiling and went into the airing cupboard in the corner of the bedroom. And then she said 6 months later, she'd wake up in the middle of the night. Something prompted her to wake up. And she said she saw, and this is the word she used coming from her generation, I suppose. She said a red Indian. Now, today we call him Native American or whatever you want to call it. But she said a red Indian coming out of the cupboard. And he was doing this as if he was trying to claw his way out of the airing cupboard. But she could only see him from the chest upwards, but she could clearly see his feathered headdress, his war paint, and even a bone necklace he had on. And she said she thought she saw two people behind him that he was leading through the cupboard. And she said it didn't happen just once. It happened like many times, many nights it was happening. And she goes, what do you think's happening? Now, I said to her, I suspect that your husband's soul was the mist that you saw coming out of his chest.
Correct, yeah.
And I said, that went into the airing cupboard. And he went into the airing cupboard, and I said, and I think that your airing cupboard is like a revolving doorway in a hotel lobby. You can go in it, but you can come out of it. And I said, I think your husband's trying to come back with this spirit guide. She had no idea what spirit guides were, or Native American spirit guides, yet she clearly described one. And so I said, I suspect the man that was in the shadows behind this Native American gentleman was possibly our husband, and he was bringing him back, rather as a bus driver would bring him back to town. And he was leading him through this cupboard, but he could only come through so far. Presumably it was difficult for whatever reason. And I've become fascinated with the idea of doorways and window frames and things like that acting as a kind of portal type of thing.
The word that was going to come, it popped into my head as portals, definitely.
Yeah. So what do you think of that then?
Really fascinating, because what we're seeing here, first of all, she's seen the mist, which is the hyperphysical soul body leaving the physical body and rising up. And a lot of people, when they go through the near-death experience, they rise up, and they look down on their bodies. You see, so her husband would have been there in his hyperphysical body, looking down from from the heights. And it's interesting, this whole thing of going into the airing cupboard and just disappearing through a portal. There's obviously a portal in that airing cupboard. Whereabouts was she living?
She was living in the town of Great Mistendon in Buckinghamshire. So I lived about 10 miles away from
yes. Yeah, that's that. Yeah. So it's a part of this kind. Yeah, there's obviously for some reason or other there's some sort of portal. It's a bit like the Narnia stories, of the portal in the back of the wardrobe. It's the same sort of thing, It could be that because he went through the airing cupboard, he created a portal as he went through.
Yeah,
it could be he haunts that portal in a sense that because you move out of physical time, the time we move into is a hyperphysical time. And so the passage of time on the physical plane has no bearing on the passage of time in the hyperphysical. So the point is that, years could pass down here, but for him, it could be he's still where he ended up in the airing cupboard. And it could be that her husband is almost like acting as a portal. He's holding the door open, if you see what I mean, so that these other spirits can come through.
I wonder how many airing cupboard ghosts there are, Neil.
Yeah. I expect they're very dry by now.
What if there's any fridge ghosts? Beers.
Yeah. Well, you see, this is the thing that leads me to physical seances where these mediums like the great Helen Duncan and other... I know these... cabinets, these materialization cabinets, they would go and sit in there, fall asleep for all intents and purposes. Then her guide, Albert, would come out the cupboard of the airing cupboard, the physical seance cupboard, but rather like an airing cupboard. And so I suspect that the airing cupboard was acting in a similar fashion to the seance cabinet procedure, where my theory, and of course I'm not a physicist, but I kind of just built up this idea in the same way that spirit builds up a physical form inside the materialization cabinet. I said to a medium, I said, why do you need these cabinets? And he said, it helps contain the energy. So I kind of theorized that maybe as this energy forms, it is contained within this cupboard structure as it bounces around or does what it has to do. And when it's solidified, it's rather like opening an oven door. You've taken a liquid cake mix, and at the right temperature, it's now reached the shape and desired state that it needs to be, a solid structure of a cake. And you open the oven door and you bring it out the oven. And in the same way that these spiritual beings they've formed themselves into solid beings, and they come out the seance cabinet. And I suspect that in a sort of a similar fashion, that the airing cupboard was a kind of an inadvertent creation of the home, rather like fake something, where it may looks like we lost you. Strange note, you flashed off and flashed on again. That's the spirit for you. So I suspect that the Native American Indian came out the cupboard rather like a spirit would do in a seance. Maybe not as a fully fledged physical being, but something almost like that.
Well, I'll tell you what happens, and that is the issue of ectoplasm, which Helen Duncan worked with. Now, again, we need to go back to the vortex. There's another aspect to this technology, the resonance technology, and this is what's how Jesus fed the 5,000, okay? You can beam super energy, which is energy beyond the speed of light, which is either hyperphysical or superphysical, but it's the twice the speed of light energy. It's the hyperphysical, but I use the word super energy for generic for all energy beyond the speed of light. What you can do is you can beam super energy through an atomic matrix, in other words, through the shape of the vortex. And what happens is that the super energy condenses through the shape of the vortex and takes on that shape. So what happens is that with Jesus, when he called on the loaves and the fishes, he put his hands over the loaves and the fishes and he said his prayers. He was blessing. Well, actually, no, the hands were the anchor point through which the spirit world could come into. It's like his hands were the portal. And then when he was praying, he was actually communicating with his hyperphysical super energy resonance operator. But that's a bit of a mouthful, so we'll just call it a genie makes it a bit simpler. His spirit guide. Do you see the idea? And what happened is that the spirit guide had like a laser beam, and they beamed the super energy through where Jesus was holding his hands over the loaves and the fishes, and they duplicated the loaves and the fishes because all the super energy was condensing through the atomic matter to replicate the shape of the atomic matter. And he fed 5,000 people, and there were 12 basketfuls of loaves and fishes left over at the end of the meal. Huh. So it's the magic porridge pot miracle, you see. And Sai Baba does it. You can go on YouTube and see Sai Baba pulling the booty out of a jar, making a great mountain of it. So again, he's using his hand as the anchor point. So going back to the portals and the doorways, there's this thing called ectoplasm, which is like the precipitation of the hyperphysical energy into physical matter. And it's rather like steam condensing, isn't it? You know, water vapor condensing into steam, which condenses into water, which then it settles into ice. So
what color would you say ectoplasm is? Because
it's very silvery white.
Silvery white, right.
And luminous. It's luminous silvery white. There's a wonderful example of it. You can see photographs. I've got a photograph in my book, which is Zutin, when Mary appeared in Zutin and she, if I can find it, and she filled the whole of the night sky and covered that's it. I've got it. There we go. If you can see it. Got it?
Oh, no, I opened it on the same.
You would do. I know Spirit's helping you, right?
Yeah.
Can you see all the ectoplasm? And the figure of the mother. Millions. I saw this on the BBC News in the 1970s. Millions of people saw this. You see, so. In a way, what happened for that Native American to manifest, you get the ectoplasm forming first, and then the form of the Native American forms in the ectoplasm. So it's much better to contain the ectoplasm in a space. With Helen Duncan, you see the ectoplasm came out of her tummy and out of her nostrils, and then the sort of swirling ectoplasm formed image of this lovely girl. I tell the story in here, and the girl turns up in the room, and she has a rose that she gives to her mother, who's in the audience, and the mother's sobbing. She's so moved, and Doris Stokes was there in the séance, and the girl offered her hand to Doris Stokes and said, "Take my hand," and she felt the hand, and she thought it would be sort of ethereal and misty, and it wasn't. It was solid and it was warm. It was a real living human hand. I mean, she's absolutely flabbergasted. So, these are real materializations of atomic matter, of physical matter. And what you're doing is you're slowing down the speed of the energy. You're condensing the speed of the energy through the vortices, through the ectoplasm, through the loaves and the fishes, through the vibhuti ash, and, actually creating the form in physical matter that you desire.
I've got an anecdote, David, that you might like, and she won't mind me saying it. I won't name her, but it's a friend of mine, and you'll find this absolutely fascinating. And Neil, I don't think you've heard this one either. So there's a friend of mine, and I won't name her, but she has told this story, and it's kind of tragic, but also quite heartwarming at the same time. Her fiance, they were going to get married, unfortunately passed away in a car accident, and this happened, I think it was last year actually. A while ago. She was absolutely devastated. They were due to be married. They were kind of like, he was the love of her life and she was the love of his life, and she was distraught, and for ages and ages she was crying and couldn't get to sleep and was really kind of cut up about it. One particular night, she says, and I'll describe it as best as she described to me, she has had, I will say, she has had paranormal activity and ghostly things happen in her life. She says that one night she was sobbing herself to sleep, basically thinking about her partner in the spirit at that time, and she felt like a pressure on the bed, as if somebody was sitting on the bed. She looked up, and this is where it gets fascinating. She saw an image of him, of his face and his body, but she said it looked like almost like a bad photocopy. It was black and white, and it was definitely him, but it was almost like a bad photocopy. And then she felt her hand being physically held by his hand, but she felt it was very, very cold. It was a very cold hand, but it was solid. It wasn't kind of like like an etheric kind of like mystic kind of like thing. It wasn't actual, as if somebody had a physical solid hand. And she held this hand for a while, and that really calmed her down. And she said she needed that, and she really needed that kind of connection. And he, I think what she said was she saw his face and he was smiling, and it seemed like a strange kind of like black and white. She described it as almost two-dimensional type face, and then it just faded, and then the sensation of being held faded, and then she kind of drifted off to sleep. And that really has helped her. Obviously, she's still very sad, she's very upset about it, but that almost kind of like was him trying to let her know that she was okay. But the fascinating parts are how he manifested himself as a almost like a 2D photocopy, and then like with the hand as like a ice cold kind of solid formation.
This is really fascinating, because what you're dealing with here is, if it was Helen Duncan, who was one of the greatest materialization mediums there's ever been, he could more than likely have manifested in a whole warm body for her. But obviously it was like, it sounds like a hologram, that black and white image.
Yeah.
So it's like working with the technology and doing the best they could under the circumstances to get some sort of manifestation there through for her. And it's like the best they could do in the way of the materialization is the hand, which is what she really needed to hold.
Mm-hmm.
But they couldn't get it like good enough to be warm. It's almost like these operators and that they're learning and they're working. It's such a dense. It's so difficult to manifest into this physical world, and also at this time when humanity, the resonance is so low, the frequencies are so low, humanity is so far away from spirit, the world is so materialistic, so dense. It's far harder for these manifestations to occur than they would in a more ethereal time, you see.
I think you're right. I think that's exactly what it was, because he was quite fresh into spirit.
Yeah.
He was and he's lost his physical body and what he looked like. He was trying to do his best from his energetic perspective to get across
That's it. You've got it.
Yeah.
You've got it. You've got it. You've absolutely got it.
He was probably helped as well by the spirits.
Oh yeah,
I mean, helped by the spirits, very much so. But it was more than likely a group of them together, and it was desperate.
Yeah.
They were kind of like fudging it and trying to do their best with sealing wax and sellotape. You know what I mean? That sort of thing.
She actually, just like a follow-on for that, she actually had an odd experience with me in the car with her. Fascinating one. So back in Halloween, we have a tradition, myself and this friend of mine, and sometimes other friends if we can drag them, we go off to kind of like zombie scare mazes. So you go to a scare maze and you get chased by zombies and all that kind of thing, and we love kind of like the Halloween schlock horror of it.
Yeah.
Anyway, we were driving back. We were on the M25. She was driving. I was the passenger, and she said something along the lines of, we're actually talking about him, the fiance, and there's this car that was trying to cut her up, and he was being a bit of a pain. And obviously, he had passed away. He actually passed away through a car accident, and she said. Something along the lines of, I'll let him go. It's probably best not to kind of like play up to that kind of thing, or something like that. I'm paraphrasing. And she looked at me and she said, "Did you just call me a good girl?" And I said, "No. What are you talking about?" Because that's not the kind of thing I would say. I'm not the kind of person that would say good girl. And she said, as soon as I said that about letting that guy go past me, I thought you just said good girl. And I said, "No, I didn't say good girl." She heard somebody, a male voice, saying "good girl" like that. Good girl. It wasn't me. That's not my vernacular. I'm sure he didn't. The spirit didn't mean it in a patronising way, but I wouldn't say, because I would deem it to be slightly patronising. Oh, good girl kind of thing. But he would have said it in a way that's not patronising. But it wasn't me that said it. It's not my language and vernacular. But it was his. It was the kind of thing that he would say. So I was in the car when she experienced that, and I just looked at her like, "What the hell are you talking about?" But she heard it clearly, very, very clearly in the car.
Yeah, it's so interesting because you see, he's there, that fiance of hers, in his soul body.
Yeah,
and he can see her, he can touch her, he can feel her, he can hug her, because she's in his in his world. Because the physical is a subset of the hyperphysical. But she can't see him, he can see her. And it's very frustrating for him. And for him to try to break back into the physical world is incredibly difficult. But this is where you mediums come in, because, the medium is a person who's kind of like bridges the worlds. You've got psychic abilities. You're not completely condensed into this world. They're like spiritual gifts. And so when she's in the car with you, Andrew, because you're in the car, the veils are thinner, so he can reach to her. He can sort of whisper in her ear. And I mean, she needs to know that, time flies, and when he's there, he's just through the veil. She needs to know that he's still alive, he's young, he's beautiful, and they're going to be together very, very soon. But in the meantime, while she's stuck down here and he's up there, she can explore all this, just like enjoying it in a playful sense, not in an emotional sense. If she can get away from the emotion and just treat it well, let's see if I can, just have if he wants to reach her, if he's trying to sort of reach her, then with the help of you mediums, she can sort of just enjoy a bit of interaction with him and a little bit of banter and some humor, and because it can help him as well. If she can just let go and have total faith that it's okay, he's there, and not be grieving too much, that helps him a lot. You see,
I think you're right. It's definitely helped her. I mean, she's she's obviously, you know, sad about it, but she needed that connection, and she got it. And that is her attitude. Actually, it is quite laid back, and she is
fantastic.
She does love banter, and she does love humor. And
yeah. The more she can banter and have humor with him, that's the best thing, you know.
Yeah.
I'll just say this before we come to the break in a few minutes. Just we'll take a short break, but I'll just say, talking of cars and spirits, I remember driving along again on the M25, but I was doing the driving. I was dropping a friend of mine off at the house, and we was coming into the Uxbridge area, not, you know, about 10 minutes away, and she's talking to me, and as she looked at me, she went, "Oh my God," and took a deep breath. And I said, "What?" She goes, "I've just seen someone, but they're totally white, sitting in the back seat, leaning forward, putting their arms around me." I'm driving, but she couldn't see her head, but for some reason she felt it was a male person. So I was being hugged by spirit, if you like, as I'm driving along. When I dropped her off, and I was on the M25, coming into towards Uxbridge area.
Yeah.
You know, sort of waiting for the exit to come off, you know, around Heathrow or somewhere like that.
Yeah.
So I don't know if this was a spirit guide or someone that knew me, but I kind of thought, oh God, is my number up or something? You know, because I'm in a car. So are they kind of are they waiting in the car to take me over or something? You know, but nothing obviously happened. That was like 12 years ago now. So, just another ghost in the machine, as they say. But so I think what we'll do, we'll take a break now, if that's all right for everybody.
Yeah, lovely.
I'll just say quickly, Neil, but before I forget, very often I get reports, because I've got a group chat with my readers. Very often, if we've done a mediumship night and we'll go home, a lot of my mediums will say, well, as I was driving home, I saw a spirit at the side, and it was definitely a spirit because it kind of disappeared. I get that quite a lot.
Wow. Excellent. Stay tuned for part 2.
Today's the best day of my life! Woohoo! Listening to the Paranormal UK Radio Network. Join Andy and Neil every month on the Paranormal Peep Show, part of the Paranormal UK Radio Network, for fun, frolics, and lots of information about weird stuff, UFOs, ghosts, and things that go bump in the night, and everything associated with them. Fascinating guests, fascinating talk, fascinating information.
Hi folks, welcome back to the Paranormal Peep Show with myself, Andy, and Neil, and we're with David Ash. Neil, have you got a question for David?
Yes. Welcome back, everybody, and welcome back, David. And David suddenly changed into a hat through the power of spirit materialization.
My hat was getting cold.
From the other side, by the sound of it, I think string theory's got a bit too far and knitted him a hat. So we've been talking about your book, David, and you've got a really good chapter which I haven't actually got to yet, about the famous wartime medium Helen Duncan. Why did you choose to put her in your book?
Well, because she's one of the greatest materialization mediums on record, and it's the way she used to work with ectoplasm that fits in with my physics, you see, because, you know, part of the work I'm doing is using evidence from the supernatural and the spiritual, paranormal, to substantiate the claims, the theory that I'm making about the about superenergy. So Helen Duncan, the evidence that she brought through is very important for the substantiation of my thesis that there are dimensions beyond the speed of light, you see, that we can access. And she was treated most horrendously, most cruelly, and she still is, by skeptics getting onto the Wikipedia page. You know, they really rubbish Helen Duncan on that. So
you believe in witches and spirits and all that sort of nonsense?
I know. I mean, that's what I love. I love trashing their materialism. I just love trashing their quantum mechanics, showing it's all a great big lie. You know, it's all just phony. You know, that's where the phony is. They want to look at themselves, these idiots, and see how phony all their stuff is. You know, they don't need to look at someone like Helen Duncan who's dealing with the real stuff.
So, she was put away under the one of the very archaic old laws, which is one of the ones they managed to dig up, basically. They needed to put away for the remainder of the war, because basically, for those that don't know, Helen Duncan was a Scottish medium who was a materialization medium, and during the World War II, she operated all around the country, but certainly to a degree of her work was in Portsmouth, which is the home of the British Navy. And she was bringing back dead sailors from various sunken ships, and they were materializing in the seance room and calling out their mother or whoever was there to greet them. And they were saying, I've died on the HMS Hood or the HMS Barnum or whatever the ship may be. I can't remember now. And basically, the word was getting around that these ships were being sunk around the British Isles, and they didn't want people to know about it. Basically, the British Navy didn't want people to know about it, so they concocted, so it's believed, this mock kind of trial against her. These fraudulent charges. She was arrested and tried as a witch, which is an old 1700s kind of law, being accused of witchcraft. And they managed to bring up enough dodgy characters to slay her down and put her away for something like 9 months, which was because they wanted their D-Day battle plans to be kept secret, and they were afraid that she might release those plans somehow through her mediumship.
I think
she was producing genuine phenomena.
I think from memory, they actually thought she might be a German spy because the establishment didn't believe in the spooky woo-woo. So they thought, where is she getting this information from? Was there some kind of, collaboration with the Nazis going on?
Oh, well, I find that quite comforting, actually, because, I think if her incarceration was linked to the war and linked to security in regard to the war, in a sense, in wartime, it's justifiable. If you've got any suspicion about anyone, even if you don't really understand them or cope with what's going on, you just bang them away for the duration of the war. So it looks as though that's what was going on.
Yeah.
Is that more than a malicious attack on her as a medium?
And I believe the Witchcraft Act in question was repealed in something like 1951 or 1952, and that kind of like that spurred on the spiritualist movement, certainly in Britain.
Yeah. They realised they had to get rid of that, repeal that act pretty quick, or someone else would be digging out.
Yeah.
Well, they replaced it with the Fraudulent Medium Act, which is an interesting act in itself. By calling it the fraudulent medium, it means that you can get tried for doing a fraudulent mediumship. So that suggests then that if you're done fraudulent mediumship, they're actually, without actually saying it, there must be agreeing to be seen that there must be genuine mediumship.
Yeah.
Otherwise, why would they try you against fraudulent mediumship, you see?
Yeah.
And so the establishment have kind of accepted it, in quotes, but they don't really want to face it, which I find interesting.
Yeah. Well, I think there's the game changer is the near-death experiences, because, people are coming back from the dead by the million now. And it's prophesied in the Bible, isn't it? In the end times, people will be rising from the grave. Well, they didn't say exactly how it's going to happen, but, if people being brought back from the dead by resuscitation techniques, isn't it what is? So on the one hand, we talked about the shadow side of medicine, and what goes on with the big pharmaceutical companies and that. But on the other hand, there's this other side of medicine of where they're developing resuscitation techniques and are really proving through resuscitation life after death. So I mean, it's the reality of the spiritual realms. We go somewhere and we meet our grandmothers, and the other thing that's so embarrassing for them is that the figure that is behind these near-death experiences more than anything else is JC, is Jesus. And I mean, that is a really, really big source of embarrassment when they try to study it scientifically. But it seems as though he's working miracles, and there are people who are surviving death and coming back who really shouldn't. I mean, there's one story of a guy where he was out rock climbing, and there was a rock fall, and a great big rock fell on his chest. And they managed to get this rock off him, when eventually they found him. And his whole chest was caved in, all his vital organs, his heart, everything crushed. And they managed to get him back, particularly in the hospital. He made a miraculous recovery, and they're all saying, how the hell did he do that? Well, when he was on the other side, he met Jesus, and Jesus said, well, you can go back if you want. You've got the choice. And said, yeah, well, I think I would like to go back because I've got my little boy, I've got my family. He said, okay, well, you can go back. I'll look after you. And Jesus does one of his healing miracles on this guy's body. He steps back into it, you know. I mean, the whole thing is outrageous. It's just such a joy what's going on in the world at the moment in this sphere.
I tell you,
time to be a medium. What?
I tell you what would be interesting if this near-death experience happened with somebody who was Buddhist. Would it be Buddha that heals them? And if they were Jewish, would it be Moses that healed them? And if they were Islamic, would it be Muhammad that healed them? That's an interesting.
Yeah, it's very. I think they're finding that there is a pattern where when people are atheists or when they come from the Christian background, or if they've got any openness to JC, he's there. But when people are, when they're as you say, Buddhist or Muslim or something like that, yes, it tends to be more in their culture, the experiences they have. You know,
interesting.
So he doesn't encroach on them if they don't have that belief in that openness to him.
Now, I read a very interesting Seth book, Seth, the Spirit channeled by Jane Roberts in the 60s and the 70s. She died in 1984. But his stuff was very almost bordering on the physics kind of stuff. He would talk about coordination points and faster than light particles and all sorts of things like that. But one of the things he said was that he acted as a crossover guide, I suppose the word would be, was that when someone crossed over to the other side, he would act like the intermediary that introduce them to the new realm and help them through their change. And he said that we would have to work through the beliefs of the person for them to understand it. So he said he took on the guise of Jesus and his friend spirit guide took on the guise of Muhammad, because he said the guy that was passing away, this was in the Middle Ages, apparently they put hot coals in his mouth or something. The Turks put hot coals in this guy's mouth and he died, which is a very nasty way to go. But when he came over the other side, apparently he secretly harbored he believed in Muhammad, but somehow thought that Jesus was the more powerful prophet. But he never told anyone that. But this was his secret belief to himself. So what Seth and this friend did, these spirit guys, decided to hatch a little plot to try and play out his beliefs in front of him. And they actually got on clouds, a bit like Monkey, you know. One was coming in on one cloud and the other one was coming on the other cloud. And it sounds completely fantasy sort of stuff, but they did it to play out this role for him. And he said they'd both be firing lightning bolts. So Jesus was firing lightning bolts at Muhammad, and lightning bolts were coming out of Muhammad's hands and firing them at Jesus. And eventually the clouds came together and they both stepped onto one cloud and then came down to the bloke and said that we're both the same people, or we're all love here, or something like that. And the guy kind of accepted it, but they had to work through his belief system. So he was met by Jesus and Muhammad, but in fact they weren't either of them in reality. And that's what was bringing me to the question when you said about Jesus meeting the guy on the other side, the rock climber. Because I was wondering that if there's so many people dying around the world, you know, millions of people dying every second, I presume, that Jesus maybe can appear at every point to these people all at the same time, or is he multi-personable? We talk about multi-dimensional. Can he split his personality or soul up to appear to all these people? Or is it other spirit guides masquerading as Jesus for the help of them crossing over, perhaps?
They're both, really, in the sense that it is a team of them that are working, and they're all working in harmony. A bit like, you know, Muhammad and Jesus shooting the bolts and saying we're all the same, we're all the one love. But when you read the Keys of Enoch, you realize that ascended masters like Yeshua in the ascended state can manifest. Like it's a bit like bilocation, but they can manifest in a million bodies simultaneously. They can be conscious in a million places simultaneously. There's no limit to their sort of manifestation. So this enables Yeshua to be there for everyone individually, simultaneously. And I mean, I can explain it. The analogy I use is rather like a television set. You've got the same broadcast, but it's going through a million television sets. You know how work broadcast signals. So it's something a bit like that, except that it personalizes so that it's the same program, but it's a different show for each person. It's something, you know, it's a way that it's like a superior technology to anything we've got on the Beeb, as it were.
Yeah. where each person on their internet has their own internet signature, don't they? They're all like their own personal ID. They can identify a person's computer being in a certain location. So they'll be watching YouTube, but they can see individually who's watching YouTube, and they'll tailor those adverts that are playing on YouTube to suit the tastes of the person. You know, like they target people with adverts about dog food or something because they've got a dog. And I suppose the spirit world are doing the same sort of thing, and they're targeting certain people.
We're seeing it with their
players.
Yeah, it's very much just the advance of us with the technology, and we're seeing how advanced AI can be. Well, you know, add that on a million times, and you see where these guys are at. They've been working for millions of years. You know, they're very advanced civilizations. But it's interesting what you were saying, like Seth saying that he manifested as Jesus. I'm sure that happens quite a lot because, you know, a lot of these manifestations of Jesus, they don't quite seem quite like him, but they, you know, I just really feel intuitively, yes, that there are other spirits that manifest as Yeshua.
They're poor imitations, but they're still doing a good job at it.
That's right. Yeah.
So with your physics, have you actually spoken to other physicists and major discussions with them, and how is it ended badly for you?
Well, it's kind of like my work has been reviewed over the years, and whenever I've had criticism, I've always welcomed it because it's enabled me to tighten the work up. Because the critics show the faults. You see, with me, I don't need answers. I need questions, because the answers are given to me from spirit world, and they just they need me to ask the most appropriate question, and the answer just pops into my head. So I'm very grateful for people who you know, the professors and physicists who challenge my work because they've found a fault, and then I've only got to sort of go away with that fault, and suddenly the answer comes through, and I go back and correct it. You see, so. It's quite an extraordinary process. But yes, it's the last person to read it was a professor of nuclear physics at Oxford University, and she found one fault in my work, and I corrected it. So, I mean, I've just sent. The new book, I think, is, you know, my trouble is that I'm so into the psychic and the spiritual. My real interest is I'm not the physics, but is the supernatural stuff. I mean, give me Helen Duncan or, you know, ectoplasm and all that sort of stuff. It's meat and potatoes to me, but I have to do the physics. So I'm really focusing at the moment on getting the physics really right, and in a book, just the physics, and linking it to Einstein so that work is available mainstream. And then I can bring in the super energy on the back of it once that's established. And so I've got a professor of theoretical physics in India at the moment called Professor Hari Das, and I've sent him the first essay today, and I've just had a reply from him. He's going to be reviewing it, reading it. So it's beginning, you know, there are a number of physicists reading my essays, and they're loving it. So I think I'm on the right track with what I'm doing at the moment. And, you know, if I get knocked off and if I get people able to rubbish me, it's my fault. It's because I haven't done my work properly. I need a rap across the knuckles. So whenever people rubbish me, I'm always very grateful.
Even if it's Professor Stephen, Professor Dawkins.
I know. I'd love to have a discussion with him. That would be great fun.
Yeah,
I think it might happen.
Unfortunately, yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to see that. Wow. I think I'll pay for front row seats on that one. Now, we spoke about Helen Duncan, and she was a threat to the establishment. Now, in the book that I've just written, which is not out yet, will be out in November. It's called True Tales of the Paranormal. I discuss Helen Duncan. Now, in my original draft, I've had to kind of tone it down a bit, but I wrote about how I considered that she was a threat to World War II society in that sort of warmongering sort of state that they were. But I wonder if the whole life after death thing is a threat today to the materialist society that we're in, because they seem to be aware of it, but they don't really want to welcome it center stage, so to speak, because I think it's a threat to the way things are. You know, I mean, if you could bring back, for instance, Dr. David Kelly, the weapons inspector, who committed suicide in quotes, when they were doing the inquiry into various things about weapon mass destruction. And he was the guy that said, no, there's no weapons of mass destruction. You got it all wrong. And he suddenly disappeared or committed suicide out on one of his country walks or something. Now, imagine if they could bring him back through a medium like Helen Duncan, and he said, actually, I was bumped off by MI5 or something of that order. They wouldn't really want that broadcast about, I don't think. And so I don't suspect that there's kind of... They don't want this kind of thing known about in the mainstream. They don't want the average Joe on the street to know that there's life after death. They'd rather you think it's a load of old baloney, because it keeps them in their castles as such. What do you think to that?
There's a lot in that. You know, the people that are controlling the world really don't want human beings free and in touch with spirit and out of control. They want us to be zombies. They want us to be half dead and just, consumer slaves. So, there is a big vested interest in keeping the wraps on spiritual and psychic phenomena. So, and of course, they're very happy with religions, because religions just are not really in touch with the true spiritual reality. They're just power trips, But I think the New Age movement is a real threat to the establishment. If they could get rid of it, they would. But there's no central focus. Everyone's doing their own thing. And one thing that's really empowered us all is the internet. I mean, it's the fact that we can do our own television shows, and people have got the choice. They can go on YouTube and they can either listen to this show, or they can turn on the Beeb and see more of the old rubbish they're churning out. So it's up to people what they want to watch. But there is the choice. There is the opportunity. And in my book, this book here, what I explain is this planet is the womb of angels. It's the Academy of Angels. That actually we're all baby angels. We're angels in the making. Some of us are pretty advanced angels, and they're here to sort of go through, an upgrade, as it were, through a human experience. But basically, the whole of human life is very much orientated around angelic development. And the point is that, you've got to have duality. You've got to have the baddies. You've got to have the tests. You've got to put the dross through fire to bring out the gold. So we have to love our enemies. We have to really appreciate the people who are making life difficult for us on the spiritual path, because they're really giving us a chance to work the antagonistic muscle, if you see what I mean. We strengthen our spiritual muscles, and that's why we have to love them. When it's like when people criticize me in my physics, I have to love them because they're serving me. They're helping show where I need to patch it up. Well, it's the same with, when the harder they make it, the higher we make it. There's an electrical component called a capacitor, and this analogy came from Ashtar. Actually, it came through me, but it was written in an Ashtar channeling. I do a bit of channeling myself, and what it is this planet is like a capacitor, and a capacitor works on a positive plate and a negative plate with a non-conductor in between. So what we have on this planet is we've got the good and we've got the evil, and they butt up against each other. So you put these two plates close together, but they don't quite touch, okay? And then what you do is you increase the resistance of the negative side. So you increase that resistance. And what it means is the voltage goes up because the positive has to overcome the resistance. So you increase the resistance a bit more. So the voltage has to go up a bit more, and then you increase it a bit more. And that's what's happening. They're working it so they're increasing the baddies. They're increasing the evil. They're increasing the shadow to increase the spiritual voltage of humanity, so that when eventually the conclusion point comes, it's going to be the biggest spark, the biggest spiritual discharge this universe has ever known. So bring them on, bring on the baddies. And the other thing, I spoke with the analogy of the theatre where we're the producer and the same consciousness is in there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you imagine if all you got in the theatre was Mary Poppins. It would be so boring. I mean, I love Mary Poppins, but not, and Sound of Music, but not all the time. I mean, we need a few of the spooky stuff, the dark stuff, the scary stuff.
We need Klaus Schwab to tell us to eat the bugs and live in a 15-minute city.
That's it, you see. So the whole thing is that, it's all part of the drama. It's all part of the show. So long as we remember, this is not a real world. It's a construct. It's like a holographic world. It's a matrix. And the thing is, it's more like a dream than a reality. We're in a dream state. And you can't do any harm to yourself because you're not even here. You go into a theatre and it's so scary, but it's not going to kill you. This great monster's coming out of this virtual reality is about to eat you, but it doesn't actually eat you. And so it's the same. You can do anything you like to the body. You can stick out red hot coals in people's mouths and kill them that way and that. It's just you're doing dreadful things to the car. You're smashing in the windscreen and you're ripping the tires. But so long as the driver gets out of it okay, and that's what happens in every instant. The driver of this biological vehicle gets out okay, and so we've nothing to worry about in this physical plane.
But those people that are out to hurt us, the people who want to do nasties to us and things, I mean, do they end up being facing the consequence of their actions on the other side?
I was on Lindisfarne. I'd had this near-death, out-of-body, whatever it is. Someone had taken me on past life regression, that's right. And I saw myself as a monk on Lindisfarne, and I had this little twig with this little cross, you see, like this. And I was holding up this twig, and this Viking came running up behind me and split me. He did the worst possible thing imaginable. For no reason. I was a good, holy, saintly little monk, not minding my own business, collecting herbs, and he literally split me in half just for the sake of the bloodlust, all right? Now, I'm traveling with my dearly beloved brother Stephen, and we're on a plane, and we're landing in Stockholm, all right? And Stephen says, David, I feel I'm coming home. And then he said, David, I wrote this song, because Stephen and I write songs, and we write songs about past lives. He says, do you know I wrote that song about the yellow sands, and I consigned souls to the yellow sands. And I think, shit, my God, the yellow sands of Lindisfarne. And then I realized, and Stephen, we were going through this thing, and we realized he was the first Viking to jump off the first ship, because Lindisfarne was the first place invaded by the Vikings. There's a pyramid. And I went to Lindisfarne, and I looked for the scene I'd seen in my past life regression of the dunes with the hills in the distance. When I got to the spot, which was just like what I saw in my vision, you see, with the hills of Northumberland in the distance, I looked to my right, and there was a pyramid. I was right in the right place for my brother to jump off that ship and kill me. So he's my dearly beloved brother. So we laugh about it, Whoever hurts you, whoever does dreadful things to you, it's a sacred contract. It's more like your brother or your mother in another life, You agree to do these things because you need that experience of suffering to learn the lessons of unconditional love. That's what we're here for, is to learn to love.
Right. It's interesting you mentioned Lindisfarne. It jogs my mind about 4 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. I was up at a place called Truth Seekers Northeast, which is a little meeting group, a bit like Dorset Earth Mysteries, but they were in Newcastle upon Tyne. And I had done a talk there that day, but they'd set the evening up. They said, please stay with us because we've got a wonderful medium coming here in the evening called Jackie Wright. And I'd never met her before, but she was a lovely lady, very, very talented medium. It turned out she was the president of the Spiritualist National Union. So when you're the president of the Spiritualist National Union, by golly, you've got to be a really good medium. And she really, really was. And so I saw her do a demonstration of clairvoyance that evening. And one of the people that she was speaking to me happened to be a lady sitting next to me. I never knew this lady. She was just another member of the audience. But she said to this lady, she said, I've got a gentleman here who's very smartly dressed. And she goes, yeah. And she goes, and I'm being shown like a big steering wheel. So I feel that he either drove a lorry or a bus or a coach. And she goes, oh, that would be my husband. He was a coach driver. She goes, well, he's showing me doing his journeys. And then she suddenly paused. She goes, did he break down on the Isle of Lindisfarne? And she said, yes, he did. And apparently she said, yeah, he showed me that his coach broke down on the other side of the bridge on the Isle of Lindisfarne, and he had to wait 4 or 5 hours for someone to come and repair the coach and get all the people back off again. So he said he certainly got to know his members of his coach party as such, But I thought it was an amazing piece of evidence for this lady to pick up that he had broken down on Lindisfarne of all places. Very nice she could get that through. But yeah, it was fascinating. But she was very, very accurate. So as soon as she said Lindisfarne, I thought, oh yeah, that's a psychic story connected with that one. Now, you talked about your own channeling, David. Have you had, have you been to any kind of seances or demonstrations of mediumship yourself?
Well, I was married to a channel. I mean, I have a very strong relationship with Shiva, and I bring Shiva through. I've got I can call Shiva up anytime I like. He's in my aura, and so I've got this very strong link because I married this doctor, and we had this. It's like the calling was that Shiva wanted to look into the West, and so she had the mediumistic powers, but she wasn't really aware of it. But she was a medical doctor and very business orientated. But one of the things I do is I help people bring on their mediumship abilities. I help people channel, and I got these amazing sacred sabais from Thailand, which I sew, and people put the sabais on, and it helps them to channel. It helps them to connect you. So they're like tools to help people. So anyway, I worked with my wife, and she started channeling, and then she's very happy about channeling our higher self, and it was so lovely because she was quite a tough cookie, but her higher self was sweet as honey, So I loved it. I loved it when I met her higher self. But anyway, she said, I don't mind channeling, so as long as I don't get any of those, they call them ongs in Thailand, any of them ongs coming through. But anyway, she went to Thailand for part of her training out there, and her higher self got into a conversation with the higher self of the medium she was working with, and she didn't realize they were cutting a deal. And the next time when she came back to Japan, where we were staying, and I said, do you want to do some channeling? And then suddenly this very loud, powerful male voice came through her saying, where am I? Where's the altar? One of my gifts is the gift of discernment of spirits. So I knew it was immediately Shiva. I said, Lord Shiva, look, we weren't expecting you. You're in Japan. We're in a hotel room. I'm sorry we haven't got an altar, but we'll sort that. He said, now that once he knew where he was, once he knew what was going on, but basically they set this thing up, and he got sucked in. He brought in because this is, but to actually find him in that state where he was a bit disorientated on arrival here. Wow. So, but anyway, for about 2 or 3 years, we traveled the West because he wanted to look into the West, and we did all these channeling sessions, and it was really, really amazing because she used to bring through Jesus and Kuan Yin and Mother Mary. And I always remember a channeling she did one Easter in New Zealand, and Yeshua came through. We invited him in because it was his day. And this is what he said. He said, you can't be both right and have love. He said, if you are right, that makes someone else wrong. And as soon as you get that polarity of right and wrong, that leads to conflict and leads to war. He said, we have to let go of our judgment of right and wrong. I'll just simply move into love, unconditional love. And that is the only way forward. And so, in a way, that's the answer to your question, about the good people and the bad people you were asking before. There are no goodies and baddies. We're all one. We're all the one being in the many bodies. We're just like children in the sandpit. We have our squabbles, but we're all going through a learning curve. And behind it all, we need to be witnessing and aware that the only thing that matters is that we love one another unconditionally.
What would you say about the alien ET kind of visitations we get in kind of context with all of that? Presumably they're playing a role on this physical stage as well with us. What's your opinion of all that?
Well, when I was in Thailand, this a chap that he lives in Thailand. He was a sort of holding the space out there, an Englishman in Thailand. And when Shiva was in, he asked Shiva. He said, "Are you an ET?" And Shiva said, "Yes, of course I am." You see, angels, by definition, are ET. They are extraterrestrial. And so the thing is that, we call them angels in the past, but actually they are ETs. And it's that ET 101. I mean, if you want to see an ET, look in the mirror. Because we're it. We're basically extraterrestrials here in human bodies going through some sort of schooling that we need, that's all part of extraterrestrial development. So we are all ETs. I mean, Andrew, you look like an ET and all. You've got your mates in the background, you see.
The thing is, I've always felt that actually my soul isn't from this planet.
Yeah. I think a lot of us find I know I'm not from this planet. I mean, most of us come from other places. But yes, I think the extraterrestrial thing it's crazy to imagine that in this vast universe, we're the only intelligent species. I think it's terribly arrogant.
Yeah. I mean, there's a thing I saw on some program the other night where they've targeted and found all these exoplanets over the last sort of 10, 20 years or whatever. They've been sending all these various telescopes and probes out trying to scan the skies. And, it's interesting because they've talked about a mythical ninth planet. Can they detect maybe the gravitational effects of a ninth planet out on the edge of our solar system? But they're not sure if it's there. But the irony is that they can see so many of these exoplanets out in the fastness of space, like 4,000 or something, the number is presently. It's an interesting thing. So, I mean, but the Greys, I mean, that's the common one that people describe as aliens coming here and abducting people. Any thoughts on the Greys or anything?
Well, it's very interesting. We went through this whole genealogy thing, and my father, he was adopted, and it's like the DNA tests show that because he's Jewish, his only link to the Jewish family that we come from, the Ash family, is through a woman, through the mitochondrial DNA, which means that the woman he thought was his aunt was his mother, and the woman he thought was his father was actually his uncle. But actually, the father is unknown. And I'm absolutely convinced that my father's mother was abducted or had some sort of extraterrestrial visitation. So I'm convinced I'm the spawn of ET. I think, I reckon I'm half extraterrestrial myself, or quarter, or whatever it is. So,
well, what blood group are you? Are you rhesus negative by any chance?
I've never managed to get my blood. I'd love to know what my blood group is. I ought to get a blood test. But what is it about rhesus negative?
Apparently, rhesus negative, and this is mainstream. It's an anomaly. They don't know what it is or where it's coming from. And apparently, a lot of alien abductees and contactees, or people who believe that they are aliens, actually have rhesus negative blood group types.
So I must get a blood. Must do the blood test and find out what I am. But yeah, I think I've been reading a book by Paul Wallace. I think, have you read it? Escape from Eden series.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, it's really worth reading. Yeah. He was an Anglican expert on Bible translation, and he's convinced that the Elohim, that the gods of the Old Testament were extraterrestrial. And I've always believed that the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was an extraterrestrial visitation. So the thing is that I really think they're closer to us than we imagine. And what Paul Wallace said is that there are millions of people, abductions. There's a lot of sexual, it's almost like cross-pollination between extra civilizations and the human civilization. Yeah. There's a lot of experimentation a lot of work going on, you know. I often wonder where I get all this knowledge from of the universe. You know, how do I know it? Well, maybe I've got an ET, you know, that sort of genes have been planted into me so that I can bring it all through from the extraterrestrial masters. You know, it's like a bit like a genetic implant, but it happened at conception, you know.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting talking about the Bible and the Christian side of things, you know, because there are some Christians out there that will kind of laugh at ghosts and UFOs and things, and yet in their own Bible, you've got the Nephilim, you've got the giants, you've got Anunnaki, and you've got the talking serpent, you know, and they're the ones laughing at us.
I know, yeah, that's right. That's so true. Yeah. One thing I love about
that's interesting. I remember
the spiritualist people. You're very open-minded, you know. I mean, you're people that I can talk to and have a lot of fun with, you know. If I get in with these Christians and religious people and all that lot, I find the religious and the physicists and that they're all locked in their paradigm.
Yeah.
And you can't have discussion with them. They're just closed, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always the sort of person, I'm a bit of a, I make a rod for my own back, but if there are Jehovah's Witnesses knocking at the door, I am the guy that tries to talk to them.
I always invite them in. I love the JWs. I think they're great.
Yeah. I like challenging them on lots of things. I like a bit of a banter with them. You know, I always remember a funny time. I don't think they were quite Jehovah's Witnesses. They were King's Church or some Christian thing, and they were doing some sort of stall presentation in a high street, I think in Bedfordshire, when I lived there for about a year. And so I was popping down to the local library or something, and I came across this stall with these Christians on. I thought, oh, I'll have a chat with these folks. So I was talking away, and I was talking about the flood and Noah, and, you know, could you really get all these animals on the ark and that kind of question. Anyway, this young Indian chap kind of joins us in the conversation, just walks up and sees what's happening. So he starts talking to me, and he starts talking to the Christian. We're having a sort of three-way conversation, and I'm disagreeing with a Christian strongly on certain points. And this Indian bloke says, and he's trying to use our expressions, and it made me laugh. He said in his Indian accent, with due respect to the Indian nation with their accents, he says, the trouble is, it's all tit for tit. And it just cracked me up. I thought, oh my God. And the Christian guy cracked up as well. And I thought, no, I think you mean tit for tat. But we'll go with that, I said.
Oh my God.
But unfortunately, the Christians, they're the folk that come round. And if you're having a spiritualist meeting somewhere, or something of like a psychic fair or tuned in events or whatever, you'll always come out sometimes and you'll find these leaflets from the Christians put on your car or something, on their windshield, you know. You are sinners or something of that nature. You know, yeah, I would never go to their church and give them hassle or put anything on their gut, but they're always they feel quite righteous in doing so, that we are the Satanists or the devil or whatever it may be. But we're just explorers. I consider we're just explorers of nature.
Well, it's
trying to understand it.
It goes back to what Yeshua said in Nelson, New Zealand at Easter. You know, you cannot both be right and have love. The problem with these people, like whether they're physicists or whether they're Christians, they think they're right. So they think they've got to teach us because we're wrong, and they've got to educate us, and they've got to save our souls. They've got an agenda to bring us into their wavelength of thinking. And it's just like, give us a break, you know. I don't want to be saved by you guys. I'm quite happy with myself as I am. I mean, we three are having this dialogue, and we're not trying to save each other. I'm not trying to convince you about the vortex. I don't give a merry fuck whether you believe in it or not. I mean, I'm just having fun. You know, we're having a good time. Yeah. And I think that's where love is. Love is where the fun is. Love is where we're all having a joyful time. None of us have got an agenda. The conversation just flowing, and a lot of interesting stuff is coming up, and it's just magic.
Mm. And interestingly, this mindset of I'm right and you're wrong, not only has it caused a lot of wars in the world, but you've got the science lot, and especially the jibby-jabby science lot, where, you know, I've got the jab and you must have it as well. And that the whole thing during the COVID era of the whole jab thing, of the jabbed versus the unjabbed, to me it sounded like a cult trying to convert people to their cult.
Yeah, so much. These religions and science is a cult.
Yeah.
very much the cult thing is there. And people can't see it's a cult because it's been around for so long. But no, a cult is a cult.
It is.
There's brainwashing.
There are some scientists, though, that are doing some research into the afterlife. And as you say, you've got the people there that have done the research there on the life after death, near-death experiences, and they've signed the affidavits to say that it's true. And there are people that do explore the realms of the afterlife. There's the Gary Schwartz is the scientist in America who has, he consults mediums. He's done lots of research with mediums. He does tests for spirits and things. And he says he finds that the spirits, when he concocts tests to sort of prove the validity of them, he says that they go one step beyond and they actually take charge of the experiment and they do things their way to surprise him. In a nice way, they turn the tables on him and they have their own independent thinking during the experiment, will go the one extra and do something else in the experiment, which is a very interesting thing. They take charge, or they have their own independence, he says, which is very gratifying. And I found that I say it's a spirit board, a Ouija board, whatever you want to call it. My mum came through about 11 months after she suddenly passed away of an aortic aneurysm, and she came through this Ouija board, and we had about 4 or 5 spirits turn up. Me and some other people were there, and my mum was patiently waiting in the wings, so to speak, and she was the last person to come in, and she said, "Hi, son." And I knew immediately it could only be one person. That was my mum. And my dad was still around when this happened, but she was meant to keep to a protocol where she was meant to give my date of birth and say what my middle name was, but she just went off on her own tangent and started talking to me. And so they let her. They said, "Oh, okay, you do what you want to do, Margaret," they said, and she goes, "Yes, I will." And she was sort of. I wanted to ask about, well, what happened? Have you met your mum and dad over there? And she suddenly said, "My mum came and met me." In other words, as soon as my mum came out of her body, she said her own mother was there waiting for her in anticipation. She knew that she was going to cross over. And I remember after having this sort of session with her, and she was sort of saying what happened, I thought, I wonder if my gran appeared in the doorway of the bedroom where my mum passed away. And I sat on the bed that she passed away on, and I looked across, and there was the doorway of the bedroom there. And I thought, I wonder if my gran was waiting in that doorway, like the idea of this airing cupboard type of formation, But again, she took charge. She suddenly said, "Yeah, my mum was waiting for me." And rather than us say, "Oh, I missed you," the surprising thing, she came through and said, "I miss you too." And that was really surprising, because you tend to think, "Oh, I thought it was just the living that miss the dead," but the dead, the spirits, miss the living too, which I thought was very interesting.
That's very interesting. It's like the story of that fiance, that couple, where he got killed in an accident.
Yes.
And, it's interesting what you're saying, because it's obvious that he was missing her, finding it really hard to be away from her. She was him, which is why she could really help him by working with mediums like you. Just as, he was trying to help her. He also needs help to get over the loss, It's a tragic loss for both.
Yeah. So, do you have any kind of expectations of when you cross over, David, of what you're likely to encounter? Or do you think it's a Jesus character that's going to meet you, or a Buddhist monk or something? Because you've got lots of various white interests, or maybe...
I think they're going to be terribly confused. I'm multi-faith. So I've got Kuan Yin and I've got Shiva.
Yeah.
They'll all be tussling, saying, no, pushing against each other, trying to come along and be the one to receive me. No, I would love to meet my father. He's passed over. I'd love it if he was there to greet me and my mother. I'd be lovely to have my mum and dad, because they were very special to me in my life. And yeah, it would be lovely to meet. I look forward to meeting Shiva. I look forward to meeting Kuan Yin. Mother Mary is a very powerful connection in my life. She's very strong. And I actually had an apparition of Mary and Jesus in Medjugorje. And it was very interesting because I'd gone with my book. I took my manuscript to the book because I wanted to get a blessing for the book. You see, it's an earlier version of this, this book here. And anyway, so I took it out to Medjugorje, and I went into the church, and it's like I had all these negative thoughts because I was a Catholic, but I hadn't been to church for many years, and I've become very anti-Catholic. And so I was going through a bit of a challenging time, and a lot of resistance. But the priest was talking about the Passion, and I suddenly tuned in to what it must have been like for Jesus. He was a young man, and to being flogged alive. And I suddenly had this wave of compassion for him. When that wave of compassion happened, it was like this hand went through my head, and all those negative thoughts were like, I saw them scurrying away like these little black monkeys. They were like, these thoughts were living entities, and they were brushed out of my head. And I just wept with joy and relief. And then this figure appeared on my right, and it was very sort of ethereal, a bit like those Rudolf Steiner paintings, the children do, and very misty and indistinct. And I knew immediately it was Mary, and I recognized her. And I said, please introduce me to your son. Well, then the next thing I knew is that he was standing in front of me, but he was very distinct. He was in this white robe, and it was blowing in the wind. And the fascinating thing, Neil, is that it was hot, and I could feel the dust in the wind stinging my cheek.
Wow.
And he was standing, and he was looking at me, didn't say anything, and I was looking at him, and he was in the distance, a bit in a hillock. And suddenly this light came from his heart, and it hit me in the chest. And it filled me with this liquid light that was also love. It was like oil, but I was absolutely blissed out of my brains. I was just full of bliss. And then this bliss began to move down. And so there was normal forehead there, but blissed out nose, and then normal nose, blissed out mouth. And it was moving up. I had these sort of blissed out legs that were sort of normalizing. And it was like oil going through a tube, the meniscus oil, you see, coming up, and it all came up. And then it got into my heart, and then it moved down, this liquid love and light moved down my arms and into my hands, and my hands were absolutely vibrating with the power. And I flicked this wallet out of my jacket pocket. I was weeping, the tears were streaming down my face. I came to, and I didn't want the money on me. The first thing I said to my fiance by me, you take that wretched money stuff and look after that from now on. And then we knew what we had to do. And my hands were vibrating with this power. And she led me, she opened all the doors for me, led me through the village of Medjugorje back to our hotel room, took the manuscript out of my brief suitcase, placed it in my hands, and all the power went vimph into the manuscript. That's the power in that book. That was
superenergy.
This book was being consecrated by Jesus Christ himself, by the Sacred Heart of Jesus, I mean, that's really Catholic, Sacred Heart, but I really experienced it came out of his heart. That you see these Catholic things with this light streaming out of his heart. When you felt that, when you've experienced it, and it's filled you with liquid light, man, I mean, it's just like you're reprobate here. I'm such a sinner, man. I'm just such a sinner. But he loves me nonetheless, I mean, that's the story you get. I didn't deserve that, Oh.
Wow. There was a guy, I think he's passed over now, called Ron Pearson.
I used to Ron Pearson. Yes. Yeah.
You knew him? So he was looking into the physics of the afterlife as well. And I was trying to understand that. And he's talking about dark matter and things like that.
Yeah.
And I believe that he thought that that's possibly the key to it was this dark matter, that they describe it in the universe. They don't know what it is, but it's so much of the universe is 80% or something like that. What's your thoughts on Ron?
Well, I think he's onto something. I think that's the non-atomic matter, the plasma that's filling space. You know how the sea's getting saltier through the through the salt coming off the land. Well, what happens? I call it star fart. These stars are blasting off. The solar flares and things like that. The cosmic rays, cosmic wind. There's all this non-atomic matter pouring out of the stars into space, and it cools down. And the spirits they feed off this plasma, and that they use that to grow their bodies as we grow ours. So space is full of literally billions and billions of these space beings who are formed, these extraterrestrial beings. This is now the fifth dimension. This is the superphysical, and their bodies are these fields, these electromagnetic fields that of energy. And the thing is that I think that's what the dark matter is. Space is full of this plasma, that's full of spirit. 80% of the universe is full of all these spirits and bodies. Yeah.
So these spirits would they be using? Although it's plasma, would that be a physical kind of three-dimensional material?
Well, yeah.
Is it the same thing as ectoplasm, or is that a different thing?
It is. There is a link between that and ectoplasm, but the point about the dark, it's still the whirlpools. I've just lost my ball of wool. Here it is. It basically, the plasma is these whirlpools, but they're not organized into an atom. Where you get the electrons buzzing around the protons and the neutrons and the nucleus of the atom. Well, the temperature's too high in the stars to get organized like that. And when the plasma gets blown off into space from the stars, you see it doesn't form atoms. You get atomic nuclei, and you get, protons and electrons and that, but they can form atoms, they can organize, but the distances are so vast that it's more likely that they are incorporated into these fields, because the fields, doesn't matter how big the distance, these electric fields are infinite in extension, and so the bodies of these spirits, these angelic beings that are in plasma, can be really vast. They can be hundreds of miles across, or thousands of miles across, even in their body, you see. Yeah.
Wow. Now, on the other side of life, various books that I've read anyway, and certainly through the trance mediumship of Leslie Flint, when various people spoke through him in seances, they would describe the afterlife that they'd crossed over to. And many of them said there doesn't seem to be a sun there. The light comes from everywhere, wherever they are.
That's it, yeah.
And it's an interesting thing, because my brother, after my mum had passed away, about a month afterwards, he said he had a dream about my mum, which, I'm not surprised, really. We're all going through that emotional baggage of losing someone. And he had a dream about her where she came down the stairs from where she died in the dream, downstairs, and she materialized as a solid person. So we all thought, oh, great, mum's back. We'll take her off for a family meal at the local pub. So we all climbed in the car in the dream, drove off to the family pub and had a nice meal there, and then came back. And then she said, I've got to go now. I've got to go back. So she went back up the stairs. And as she was going up the stairs, my brother in his dream said, will you come back? And she turned around and said, and this is quite an interesting remark, she said, I will return and I will come back to the land of shadows. And then she went up the stairs and just slowly dematerialized as she went away. And I thought that's an interesting thing, the land of shadows, because we have shadows cast by the sun. Yeah. And I started thinking about the Leslie Flint tapes and things where they said there's no sun, there can't be any shadows, I presume. I don't know.
Correct. Yes. There's light coming out of everywhere.
Just wondered if...
Brilliant. This is such an interesting conversation. But yes, of course, it's all the light coming from the sun that sets up the shadows. Yeah.
Now, here's another interesting physics thing that will blow your brain a little bit. And I don't pretend to even address the physics, but it certainly warps my brain. About 20 years ago, I saw a DVD because I was writing a book co-writing a book at the time called Fairycraft. So I was doing lots of research into the fairy kingdoms and the fairy realms and things. And I came across this DVD, and for those that want to try and watch it themselves, it's on YouTube. It's called The Fairy Faith by Canadian filmmaker John Walker.
Yeah.
And he interviews this Glaswegian builder, Steve O'Dale, I think his name is. And he was on holiday by himself, by all accounts, in Southern Ireland. And it just finished raining. And he was by this area called Fairy Hill or Fairy Fort. And he said he could hear this weird sort of singing or music coming from somewhere. Couldn't trace where it was coming from. But the rain had just finished raining on this hill. He said the sun was starting to come out. And it started to form a lovely rainbow over the valley. And he thought, wow, what a lovely, stunning view that is with a rainbow and the sun's coming out. And what a beautiful view. He said all the time that he was entranced by this lovely view, there was something out of his peripheral vision down here that was moving. And it bugging him. And he didn't know what it was, but he carried on looking at this scene unfold. But this thing was still moving down near it. And he thought, what is that? And he looked down. And he said he saw a small woman, about a foot high, maybe a bit taller, brown leathery looking skin, brown leathery sort of hat. And she appeared to have, he described them as, they looked like an old pair of sheep shears. That's the nearest thing he could place it to, like an old pair of sheep shears. And he said she was cutting around the sole of his shoe like this. And he said where his shoe extended on the hill, he said there was the male equivalent of this being, this small woman, who, and this is where it gets weird, was rolling up Steve's shadow like a roll of paper. And he said he just looked at them and he didn't know what to say. And he just went, oi, like that, to sort of say, what are you doing? And they suddenly looked at each other in shock, as if to say, he can see us. And he said they went and just vanished like that. And he said, I dread to think what would happen to me had I not seen them. They would have carried on cutting his shadow away and rolled it up like paper and stole it away. He doesn't think because the sun had only just come out to shine, which caused his shadow to form. Because presumably it was overcast, rain and everything. So it's almost as if they were laying in wait for a shadow to be formed that they could then steal.
Isn't that amazing?
Still thoughts from that. I mean, it's not.
That is just mind blowing. I mean, I can't comment on that.
Yeah.
I have a feeling this man's going to answer a question that I have no answer for. I've never been so blown out by anything in my life that they were stealing his shadow. I love stories like that, Neil. I just love stories like that. It really resonates with me.
Yeah. If you like stories like that, David, have a look at the link.
And you can watch it yourself.
David,
what's that, Andrew?
If you like
the
weird stories, have a look at the Woollerton Gnomes.
Oh, lovely. Can you send me the link? Yeah.
A series of children, I think in 1979, they were playing by the park of Woollerton Park on the edge, and it was just getting dusk. I think it was early September, and there's about 7 of them, and they were playing, and then suddenly, as it got dusk, these lights started to appear out of the corners of trees, and out of these trees came these small little cars with gnomes in them, and they thought there must have been about 60 gnomes in about 30 cars, 2 gnomes per car, and these cars hovered. They didn't have wheels like we'd understand. They flew over and buzzed over logs and things like that, like a bit like Luke Skywalker's land speeder or something like that, I'd imagine, out of Star Wars. And they hovered, and they chased the kids around the park, but it wasn't done in a nasty fashion. It was done in a light-hearted, fun, chase me kind of thing. But interesting enough, as soon as they got to the edge of the park where the light was coming through, like from the street lamps, the gnomes wouldn't go there. The gnomes couldn't go to the light of the edge of the park where the street lamps were. It's as if the daylight or the light of the lamp affected their materialization in some way.
Isn't that extraordinary? Yeah. Isn't that extraordinary?
Yeah.
So the same with sounds, you have to do them in the dark, don't you?
Mostly, yes, mostly.
Yeah, with But with the shadow stealing, I think they were called brownies. That's what they call them in folk.
That's right, yeah.
Small brown beings. They're kind of presumably part of this fairy kingdom.
Yeah.
and they're brownies because of the brown leathery looking skin they've got. But we were talking to fairy lore enthusiast Simon Young a few months ago, and I told him that story as well, and he was enthralled by it. And he said that a couple of these brownies appeared on this guy's bed one night, and he said they had a bag, and he said that when he woke up and there's these two brownies sitting on his bed holding a bag, he said they were eyeing him up like they would eye up a horse at market, like he was a commodity, and they were prepared to take something from him and put it in that bag, I suspect, which was, again, the bag is almost symbolic of taking something. They were shopping for something.
Yeah.
And I think these gnomes, these brownies in Ireland would do the same to Steve Odell. But it's a bit like Peter Pan, taking the shadow of Peter Pan, separating and that kind of stuff. Bizarre.
It's amazing.
But then it made me wonder if they come from a place. They come from a place, presumably, like my mum described, with no shadows, because there's no sun there. And so my mum described in the dream the land of shadows, and yet these creatures have come to steal the shadow of Steve Odell. You see, so
because that's what would be valuable in their world. Shadows would be really treasures because you know. I mean, you see our world feels so concrete, and yet the fact that a shadow can have some sort of reality. It's almost like you're stepping between the worlds. When you're actually seeing these creatures, you're seeing into their world. It's like your vision. The brain has these filters which closes us down from our perception of the hyperphysical world. But as soon as you lift the filters, that's why these narcotic drugs like ayahuasca and cannabis and LSD and these sort of things, they alter the chemistry of the brain, so the filters drop and people start seeing into the other worlds. It's like you guys, the fact that you're mediums and psychics means that the filters aren't working properly. You see what I mean? So you're not really cutting yourselves off from the other world to be fully in the physical. So when people are seeing the brownies and they're seeing that it's almost like the veils are really thin, and so it's almost like the shadow has, to us it's just ethereal, it's just a shadow, but to them it's almost got a physicality in their world, you see. It's fascinating. Anyway, I've got my gnome hat on. This is my. I knew why.
It's become very gnome-like.
I know. We're talking about gnomes, and I'm afraid to go and revealed my real identity.
Right, I think we better draw this chat close.
Now the gnomes
say ayahuasca. We could chat to
what?
Yeah, ayahuasca. Gary Robinson, if you're listening, we're going to have you back to. You're going to hopefully tell us about your ayahuasca research. So we look forward to chatting to you later on this year, Gary, if you're listening. So we'd like to say thank you to David Ash for talking to us about his book, Superenergy, which I bought a copy of Amazon, but it will be for sale in W.H. Smith's and other good retailers. But certainly you can get it off Amazon. And you're bringing out another book soon, David, is that right?
Yeah, I'm working on another book called Was Einstein Right? And it's what I'm doing is I'm separating out the quantum vortex, and I'm coming in with that first. And then I'm going to redo the superenergy and update it and upgrade it and do that as the second book as well. So the two books are separate, you see.
Excellent. And if people, you've got your website as well, haven't you?
Yeah, I've got
davidash.com or
there's a davidash.co, but it's pretty rudimentary. What I prefer people to do is go to my Substack page, and on Substack, David Ash 333, you get all the essays. You can read the essays that are going to be in the new book. And also, if you go onto Bandcamp, I've got an album out of really beautiful spiritual music called Balm for the Soul. So it's good if people go to Bandcamp, and also it's on Spotify and all the other platforms. But go to Bandcamp and listen to my album, and you'll find it really will be balm for your soul. And of course, I've got all my I've got my channel on YouTube as well. So there's a lot on YouTube as well.
So you can find David everywhere on Spotify,
David's everywhere.
YouTube.
The gnome is everywhere.
Excellent. The gnome. The physicist gnome is everywhere. Excellent.
The gnome.
All right. Thank
gnome,
you.
yeah.
Thank you very much, David. Andy, any last words before we go?
I just think when I think of Bandcamp, I just think of American Pie and some very strange goings on.
I'll have to look into that then. All right. Well, thank you very much indeed, one and all, for joining us. You've been listening to the Paranormal Peep Show Radio Network. Thank you very much once again for David Ash, and we wish him good luck on his new book. And we'll see you next month on the Paranormal Peep Show. Good night.